Beyond the Bell, Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostick, Caroline Hyde, Taylor Riggs counting you down to that closing bell, here to help take us beyond the bell. It's our global simulcast partners, Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec. We welcome in our audiences across Bloomberg Television, Radio, and YouTube. A lot of sharp moves right now, Carol, in this market, in equities and bonds. And I just want to point out real quickly, a huge spike down right now in WTI crude, now back down below 91 bucks a barrel. It was as high as 95 earlier in the day.
Yeah, interesting reaction, especially coming off those FOMC minutes. I love our Markets Live blog saying no fresh fodder when it comes to the hawks when they are thinking about the Federal Reserve. It feels like everybody just calmed down a little bit, and you saw that play out, certainly in the equity markets, and yields just coming in a hair.
Yeah, it was interesting to see the narrative shift around the day before we got those FOMC meeting minutes over concerns about geopolitical tensions to then essentially a sigh of relief that there wasn't anything more hawkish in those minutes, Caroline.
Anastasia Amoroso were just with us, though, from iCapital, saying, look, it was more hawkish if you look at it. If you think that they're going to listen to some of the words coming out, the in-between meeting discussion points that we hear from members of the FOMC. And she says, look, Bullard front and center, sort of saying we're going to get hawkish. And interesting, therefore, price moves on the back of that. But really, the market does seem more dovish on the day. We're up on the Russell.
Interesting, all the notes that are coming in, Caroline, from some of those Fed meeting minutes. I just read one that crosses the wire from BlackRock's Bob Miller, saying that the Fed can no longer afford to be data dependent and remain nimble because they are so far behind the curve that they have to get moving and that they have no choice but to get moving absent an exogenous shock to the system. If those aren't some hawkish words, Romaine, I don't know what is.
All right, a mixed bag here for the markets. We were deeper into the red on the day. We broke pretty high into the green here. It looks like we're going to end the day relatively flat here. About 300 stocks in the S&P are higher, but unfortunately, it's not really the big names that you need to sort of move us. The S&P 500 going to close higher by about 4 points, about 0.1%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average going to close down 52 points, or about 0.1%. The NASDAQ Composite also going to close down by about 0.1%. The Russell 2000, a little bit more pep in its step here, up only about 3 points or so, just about 0.1% or so on the day, Carol.
I like that pep in your step. What's interesting, too, in terms of the decliners and the winners, especially the winners, I felt like it changed to some extent in the S&P 500 after those FOMC minutes. As for names in the S&P, 305 names higher, and Taylor 199 lower.
And you really see that, Carol, when you take a look at some of the individual sectors. Certainly a little bit more green than there is red. I think what really stands out to me is energy. Once again, the best performer on the day. Yesterday, I think crude fell more than 2 standard deviations below sort of its average, and energy stocks were the underperformance. So you're really seeing that reversal today. You go down the board, there are a few losers. It's food and staples, and it's software and services and technology. But those losses really are no comparison to some of the previous losses that we've seen earlier, Carol.
All right, just quickly through some of the gainers, because we are awaiting some big earnings after the close. Kraft Heinz up about 5.6%, so just off its highs. That was top in some of the major equity averages. Fourth quarter earnings topping estimates, price hikes helping the company offset those higher costs. Airbnb, we broke that down after the close yesterday, up about 3.7%, too, also beating on the top and bottom lines. The company's CEO saying the best in their history. And then Huku. Oh, we got some earnings.
Yeah, I'm going to interrupt you there. You can get to Huku later. We should point out Applied Materials reporting earnings right now. Their 1Q numbers here, the adjusted EPS coming in at $1.89. That's slightly above what the street was looking for at $1.85. Net sales at $6.27 billion, slightly higher than the consensus estimate of $6.17 billion. We should point out we're going to get a lot of semiconductor earnings here after the bell, including from NVIDIA as well. We got Advanced Analog Devices, earlier in the day, and they had a pretty good quarter. So something to keep an eye on here as we get deeper beyond the bell here with some of these Philadelphia semiconductor names and whether maybe they give a boost to the market tomorrow.
I want to take a look at Tripadvisor as well because we're getting earnings from them as well. Looks here like fourth quarter revenue comes in a little bit light, $241 million versus expectations of $249.5 million. Looking, of course, at their bottom line, fourth quarter adjusted loss per share is 1 cent, and that was versus expectations of a gain of about 8.7%. So you're seeing a little bit lower on both the top and the bottom line, and an adjusted EBITDA that comes in a lot lower than expected, well, at about 29 million, Caroline, versus estimates as well of 45.7 million.
And this is important because, again, it's another tell on our desire to get back out. And the fact that we're falling 8% after hours on Tripadvisor on the miss of this, maybe some optimism built in through Airbnb and the likes of the Expedia, the outperformance that we saw in those earnings, but Tripadvisor not managing to live up to expectations.
Yeah, I wonder if this is something very specific to Tripadvisor, because it seems like some of the other earnings that we've had and some of the other data we've seen shows that we're getting back out there. We are buying tickets, we're booking hotel rooms and Airbnbs, and I guess just trying to get back out there.
Competition with Google, right?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
But it is interesting, right, that you don't always get the same story from all of these companies as the economy reopens. And so this is why it's interesting. I'm waiting on DoorDash to see whether or not how that was impacted by the variant and whether or not
Have
they
you booked
benefited.
any big trips yet, Carol, for this year, 2020? Not yet?
Have you booked any big trips?
I have, but I'm not going to tell you just yet.
You're such a mysterious man, such a mysterious man. AMAT, by the way, guys, up about 3.7% here. We're waiting for what on NVIDIA as well, and Cisco, another big one.
Yeah, I want to go back to AMAT because the company's president and CEO, Gary Dickerson, alluding to supply chain challenges for the company in the company's press release, saying, while the supply environment remains challenging, Applied Materials is doing everything we can do to deliver for our customers, and we recorded our highest ever quarterly revenues. Our outlook for 2022 and beyond is very positive as long-term secular trends drive our market structurally higher, and Applied's broad technology portfolio puts us in a great position to capture a larger portion of our served markets.
And I just want to point out, one reason why we pay so much attention, obviously they make basically the machines that make the semiconductors.
Yeah. Yep.
And so when you talk about who their customers are, you get a good read here on maybe what they're feeling or maybe what they're not feeling.
And that is why Cisco is going to be such an important read as well, because here's a company that wants to get the hardware into your offices, wants to be able to offer you the services that come with. But if you've got a supply shortage, what does that mean for their overall ability to service the demand that they've been seeing? So that's going to be an interesting tell. But as we see, some of these chip makers have been on fire. We're still waiting NVIDIA as well.
We are indeed, of course, as we wait to watch those. I think what stands out to me, we're looking at Tripadvisor again. Listen to this, you guys. For monthly unique users, they're still only about 73% of 2019's same period.
Wow.
Previously was 55, 70, and 76. So you haven't really seen sort of a broad recovery back to 2019 if you're still only seeing 23%. And their operating expenses are still up 30% year over year.
Let's go to Cisco quickly, and because we are getting their numbers coming out, second quarter revenue, $12.7 billion. Basically in line with the $12.66 billion that had been anticipated for their fiscal second quarter. They're seeing third quarter revenue to grow anywhere from 3 to 5%, so slightly ahead of the overall expectations. We're seeing the shares rise more than 3% after hours as they see a third quarter adjusted earnings per share 85 to 87 cents, but that's just below where the overall expectation was for 87 cents, but still growth in the next quarter, it would seem, from revenue. Carol.
All right, Cisco, an important one, especially they continue to shift, right, to software and other services. DoorDash, not so great, down about 9% here in the after hours. Fourth quarter revenue, pretty much in line, 1.3 billion. The estimate was 1.29 billion. Company talking about the outlook. So sees first quarter adjusted EBITDA 0 to 50 million. Huge miss. The estimate was for over $100 million. 2022 marketplace government, they're talking about 48 to 50 billion. The estimate was 49, but that number, first quarter adjusted EBITDA, Tim, that is a big miss.
Yeah, it certainly is. Let's go through these once again. This is the 2022 marketplace coming in 48 billion to 50 billion. Estimates were for 49.09 billion. Sees 2022 adjusted EBITDA 0 to $500 million. Quite the range there. Estimates were for $452.3 million, Romaine.
All right, yeah, and we're seeing the shares really all over the map here. And it's interesting because we're talking, I believe it was with Mandeep Singh from Bloomberg Intelligence when we got Uber earnings and kind of the discussion about Uber Eats and just kind of the delivery space in general and how these companies adapt to it. And he kind of made it clear that profitability for these companies, at least for that delivery side, it's kind of going to be elusive. It's just basically the business model.
And is it elusive with all these subsidies, Carol, until you get someone to buy them out and you get just further consolidation, and then the subsidies and the competing on price no longer is a huge factor?
Can I just jump in? Cisco increasing its buyback authorization by $15 billion. So if you want to see a stock move, like you think about, this is what we've heard from a lot of market watchers, that these companies have so much money on their balance sheet. Do they do deals? Do they ultimately do buybacks, which is certainly a theme that we've seen easily over the past decade?
Or do they do M&A, like we saw with the fact with DoorDash doing some purchases, and how much is that liked by current regulators? But interesting that once again, companies trying to sort of reward the investor base for sticking with them as we ride out the ongoing narrative of how much future they can tell us about when we're still within COVID. This is a company, Cisco, which of course has a hybrid work revenue they call of $1 billion. But as they say, increasing that buyback authorization, just authorization, but we'll see how much of that they actually make in the market. $15 billion worth, Carol.
Yeah, and just to recap here, some of these after-hour moves. I mean, Cisco up more than 4%. It's the third biggest mover here in after-hours trading. The biggest mover actually right now is DoorDash, which is up about 19%. Applied Materials, those earnings also came out. Those shares higher, Carol, by about 3%.
Yeah, something to play with. And as you said, DoorDash turning around now, up 17%.
Are we supposed to get a Boston beer today?
Yeah, we are. Speaking of share buybacks, Bloomberg Intelligence saying that the company could buy up to 15% of its market cap.
And I hear beer prices are on the rise.
Yeah.
What about hard seltzer?
You guys were at
That's the problem with Sam,
at the Super Bowl, right? And it was all just like beer
We didn't go to the game,
What is
actually.
Beer seltzer? Did you have this?
We did not go to the
isn't
game.
Beer already?
Just clarifying. We want to get it right. Just
wink. Okay, I got it.
NVIDIA is still coming, everybody. It's all about chips today. All right, we got to run. That'll do it for our cross-platform coverage on radio, TV, and YouTube. We will see you again, same time, same place tomorrow.